Welcome to Roundhill Radio. Through our conversations, we discover the holy in the ordinary, find moments of grace and peace, and redefine what we're talking about when we talk about faith. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Leslie.
How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good. Glad to hear it. So before we started recording, just a little behind the scenes, we were discussing this episode today. It's Ash Wednesday. Lent begins today, and I was confessing to use a church word, that
good use of Lent.
Thank you. That I don't necessarily, I'm not feeling Lent this year. I'm just sort of like, Lent is happening. And I'm just, some years I'm in it. I'm really in it as like an experience of faith, as a time of, that 40-day transformation. And that's not this year. So we were discussing it, and then we just decided, you know what, let's hit record and let's talk this through.
Right.
I also thought maybe I'm not the only one, and maybe this conversation could also be part, supporting someone else.
Well said. Well said. Well, I think you really put your finger on something, Leslie, that we are still not feeling a lot of things.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I think that over the past almost 3 years now, we've been wondering what some of the long-term effects would be from living through this incredibly horrifying time. So one of those effects simply might be that it's going to take us time in certain areas of our lives, and we're not going to know what those areas are until we actually encounter them.
Right.
When we may feel a kind of flatness, lack of energy, total lack of interest. And then we get to ask the question, all right, so how do I receive that time? Realizing that I'm not feeling what I think I want to be feeling.
Right.
But I think that is not an uncommon experience. What might be really helpful, though, is to go a little deeper into that when we have that time and say, why do we think that that's so?
Yeah.
And maybe this is an occasion where we have to learn how to let some things go and think, well, next year could be different. I'm not going to force it. And I'm going to receive what I can at this time. But maybe this isn't when I most need the traditional season of Lent. Maybe I need to treat this more as something else.
I think also part of Lent for me, is wanting to find something new in it. And maybe I'm approaching it from the wrong angle. Maybe the newness isn't what is needed. Or maybe I'm hunting down the wrong trail.
And are you suggesting that it's more of the actual simple traditions of it?
I'm wondering,
not worrying too much of whether it's new?
Yeah, and I think maybe leaning in towards something that is traditional, leaning in something that is, that finding something in that repetition, I mean, this will be my, call it 20th liturgical year as a professional organist. So it's finding what in that is compelling. And maybe I'm making it too much about myself, which often happens. It's fine.
Well, it can, but I mean, I do think that your earlier comment is well taken. I don't think it's an unusual experience.
Yeah.
And actually, sometimes the juice in some of these traditions it runs dry for us, runs out.
Yeah.
And then we feel like we might be just left with the husk of something that once had a lot of meaning and gave us a lot of pleasure, but now it doesn't do that. So I think that the other bigger question is that people are finding not only in the seasons of the Christian year, but in the experience of church itself, a kind of flatness.
Sure.
Right? And are trying to rediscover that or rethink it.
Sure.
When people ask me now, so, how many people belong to your church? I said, well, it's almost impossible to tell.
It really is.
Right?
Yeah.
Because, yes, there's definitely a kind of steady number of people who come each Sunday into the sanctuary, but there are also people listening in on our online service every week. And many people experience this podcast as their touchstone for the week. That could be hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And they are then in some cases bringing the energy or insight of these experiences out into their lives, sharing it with other people.
Yeah.
Very much a religious experience. So who knows? So that's all new to us. And we're trying to figure out how that actually, equates to church.
Yeah. And I'll just say what an honor it is to be that for people. What an honor it is to connect with you all over the world.
It's a tremendous gift.
It's incredible. We're so grateful for you listening right now. We're just, what a fun, we never could have imagined this in like November of 2017 when we were sitting in the choir roping closet and talking about like, let's record a podcast.
Right.
I was marveling the other day about, we had our, as you know, it was just art month. I was marveling about that I didn't remember where the idea for the art film came from, which is still on YouTube, by the way. If you just look up The Marks We Make,
Please watch it.
It's there. I'm really proud of it. But I didn't remember where the idea for that came from. The same thing with this podcast. I cannot remember us being like, yeah, we should start a podcast.
Right.
Like what?
I agree.
And now it's this, which is so fun. And it's,
So I think, here's one thought about these seasons, and the feeling that we were having and the conversation earlier and the question you raised is that what I've always thought about the seasons is that, yes, Lent always happens in late winter, early spring.
Yeah.
But Lent could happen anytime.
Sure.
Right? It's whenever we are trying to kind of prune away unnecessary habits or unhelpful habits in our lives, recenter ourselves. That can happen in December just as easily as it can happen in February. And maybe that's the thing we ought to be paying attention to. What's happening in the experience of our lives right now, whether or not it lines up with the season.
It's like spiritual spring cleaning.
Spiritual spring cleaning.
Do you think that's why that kind of aligns? Or is it because it's, that's at the beginning of every spring, people tend to want that fresh, open things up, a freshness, a cleanse of things that don't no longer are helpful.
It certainly does in our part of the world. And when you take a look at what February often looks like, it's pretty lean.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Very
pretty
gray.
Gaunt.
Pretty gray.
And we haven't been having a whole lot of snow. Normally things are covered in snow and it's cold, but even without that, the landscape just looks pretty bleak, or at least in New England, when it's a cloudy day, it looks pretty bleak.
I consider this the time when I can see my neighbor's house.
Right.
Because in the summer and spring, it's completely full of leaves. And then come like October, November, I can see his house all again all of a sudden from my kitchen window. And I'm like, oh, it's that time of year.
Right. Well, maybe there's a little lesson even in that. It's a time when we see a little bit maybe further.
Oh, nice.
Right.
Nice.
Kind of take the vision a little bit farther.
Yeah.
And that can happen during the season of Lent. It can be that intentional. But I do think... what is the old saying? It's in one of Shakespeare's plays. I think it's King Lear. Someone says, in this sad time, we must obey. Speak what we feel, not what we ought to say. And so what is it that we feel? Well, we might not be feeling anything, right? And there's an old word for that, Acedia, which means, used to be known as the noonday demon. And it's that experience you feel. Isn't that a great phrase?
That's great.
It's this experience of just, life just doesn't feel like it had the same kind of energy or vibrancy that it had. I do think that we hear more and more stories of people emerging, to feel a greater flourishing, which we hope will just continue in so many different ways. But there can still be that kind of drag happening in people's lives.
Sure.
So things that used to sound interesting, like Lent, I can't wait for the season of Lent. I'm going to prune some things away.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not quite so intriguing. So we have to find out, so where is the Spirit moving? What is it calling us to do? Where's the wind blowing these days? And how can we follow that?
Yeah. Well, and you are, as of when this episode is out, you are actually on sabbatical part 1. We actually haven't talked about that on the podcast.
Yeah.
So speaking of finding new things and new energy, and what are you hoping, however much you want to share on the podcast.
Yeah.
What's February for you, and what are you up to, and what are you hoping to return with, or
yeah. ... Well, I had a very specific goal. But I just have to say first that some years ago, when I was preparing to go away on a sabbatical, which happens every 5 years in many pastors' lives, I gave this like extensive explanation of the sabbatical, and someone said, "You know what? Just go." Save us the explanation.
Can I just pause really fast and say I can't believe it's already been 5 years.
Isn't that amazing?
I will fully admit that when you said you were going on sabbatical, my brain went, Again already? Really?
I know. You aren't the only one.
I'm fully supportive. I just was like, really? Wasn't he just go on that?
Well, so, I took the lesson learned from the last one. I thought, okay, I'm not going to over-explain this.
It's good.
But the phrase that came to me was just this one: a time to rest and a time to stretch. And I mean that both in the spiritual sense of maybe stretching myself to read some things and explore some ideas that just haven't had the chance to do, especially in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
But the stretching also is literally physical stretching. It's becoming more supple. It's trying to accent health, I would say, more on this sabbatical than I have done in the past. So a time to rest and a time to stretch. And I'm really just allowing it to unfold.
Nice.
And that way I'm open. And in fact, someone the other day, not related to the church at all, something I was doing, mentioned a book to me. And it sounded intriguing. So I then went and took a look at the book online, and that led to the exploration of another book. And I thought, no, I never, ever would have explored that area. But I'm going to do so now because it's interesting and intriguing.
Yeah.
And I want to read about this. So that's kind of, that's the way I see things unfolding during the sabbatical.
Yeah.
Sort of just let the Spirit move me in whatever direction it wants to.
Excellent. Maybe you need to bring back Ed's book recommendations on the podcast.
I will do Ed's book recommendations. I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, those are fun. And if you guys want to we had a book club briefly.
We did.
If you guys want that back, let us know. We weren't sure what the reception of that was, admittedly. So you guys let us know if you do. If you don't, that's fine. It's really okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah. So that's the plan.
That's the plan. And we have a fun podcast plan for when you get back. That's going to be good times. I'll tease that on here. So that'll be out March 1st.
Yes, we do.
So thank you.
Thank you
for this. I think I feel a little bit better about Lent now.
All right.
I think I'm going to focus in on the clearing out aspect. I'm going to focus on the bringing in some fresh air.
Yep.
Some fresh energy.
Like it.
I think we're gonna try that. Try that on for size, and I'll let you know how it goes.
All right. I'll be ready to hear.
Well, thank you all for listening. Round Hill Radio is brought to you by the friends and members of Round Hill Community Church. For more information, please visit roundhillradio.org.